Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the account?
Remember when Johnny Carson cried like a baby over Ronald Reagan getting elected? Yeah, neither do I. And you know why he didn't? Because his wife didn't keep his balls in a Tupperware container next to a box of tofu burgers. But the killer phrase was at the end.
His blackface costumes included his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone.
Now, Karl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time.
And let's not forget Oprah.
In a shocking twist that turned late-night television upside down, Jimmy Kimmel, once one of comedy's most irreverent voices, is now being dragged into the spotlight by media heavyweights Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld. Once known for his provocative humor and off-the-wall antics, Kimmel has shifted his tone dramatically over the years, favoring emotional monologues over actual comedy. But critics argue that this shift isn't growth, it's decline. In a searing critique, Kelly and Gutfeld accuse him of trading authenticity for approval and laughs for lecture notes. With falling ratings and a shrinking fan base, Jimmy Kimmel is becoming less of a comedian and more of a cautionary tale. Has he truly evolved into a moral compass for modern media, or is he simply playing it safe to remain relevant? Let's dive deep into how two of television's most candid commentators exposed what many have suspected: the fall of Jimmy Kimmel, one monologue at a time.
Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare.
You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song. But that's it. You big...
Jimmy Kimmel once thrived on boundary-pushing comedy. Remember The Man Show? Beer, pranks, and raw humor were his staples. But that version of Kimmel seems long gone. Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld mock this transformation, portraying him as a neutered version of his old self. Gone are the gut-busting monologues. In their place, we now find teary-eyed sermons on healthcare, immigration, and climate change. Instead of cracking jokes, he's cracking under the weight of his own need for approval. They liken his current state to a motivational speaker with a studio budget, more concerned with applause than actual entertainment. Gutfeld jokingly says Kimmel clutches his punchlines like a comfort blanket, suggesting even he knows the laughs aren't coming. This isn't just a fall from comedic grace, it's a complete identity shift. According to his critics, the once edgy comic has become a caricature of political correctness in late-night form.
Back in the day when I was on the primetime of Fox and you were on the primetime of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late-night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Piers. I mean, occasionally they understood that they were in the game of making everyone laugh. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Colbert, Kimmel, Seth Meyers, who I struggle to even mention that guy's name. He's such an absolute I can't stand him. But anyway, it's just my thought bubble out.
Late-night television was once a refuge from the day's stress, a place where viewers could escape politics and just laugh. But not anymore, according to Gutfeld and Kelly. They argue that Kimmel, along with peers like Colbert and Meyers, have turned comedy into propaganda. Instead of jokes, we get political rants veiled as humor. It's no longer about skewering everyone equally, it's about reinforcing a narrow ideology. Kimmel is described not as a comedian, but as a political operative with a studio band. Kelly points out that while comedians used to hold power accountable, Kimmel now acts like an unpaid spokesperson for the Democratic Party. His monologues have less to do with wit, and more to do with winning applause from his liberal base. In doing so, he's abandoned half the country, turning potential fans into political adversaries. The punchline has been replaced by partisanship, and viewers are tuning out.
And you know what that means. Jimmy Carter has to stay alive for 4 more years. It's also time for liberals to tell themselves that they're still right about everything and their hysteria and delusions of persecution are perfectly normal. Yet right now, they're melting like that stick of butter Joy Behar keeps between her thighs to prevent chafing. Case in point, last night, all the other late-night hosts threw a hissy fit. It's too bad Tim Waltz is still grieving, or he could send them all a sack of industrial-strength tampons.
Jimmy Kimmel's delivery has changed, and not for the better, say his critics. Kelly paints him as a smug, self-righteous figure who delivers every joke like he's grading your morals. Gutfeld calls him the embodiment of Hollywood elitism, a man who lectures from his studio like a school principal wagging his finger at the unruly kids. They argue that his on-screen persona is no longer relatable or endearing. It's condescending. This moral superiority, they say, has become so dominant that it suffocates his comedy. Kimmel's jokes now feel more like punishments than punchlines. Instead of sharing laughter, he delivers decrees, leaving the audience either annoyed or apathetic. The tragic irony? In trying to appear as the most woke guy in the room, Kimmel has alienated the very people who used to laugh with him. He's not inviting the audience into the joke. He's talking down to them from a pedestal.
Took a look at some of their reactions to the news of Trump's win. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great. Yeah, me neither.
Let's be honest, it was a terrible night last night. It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our climate. It was a terrible night for poor people.
Gutfeld coined a biting term to describe Jimmy Kimmel's modern brand of humor: clapter. It's the kind of response where audiences clap not because they're amused, but because they agree. According to critics, this is the crux of Kimmel's downfall. He's not trying to be funny, he's trying to be right. His monologues are carefully crafted for applause from ideologically aligned viewers. Instead of risk-taking jokes that challenge norms, Kimmel plays it safe with statements disguised as punchlines. This pursuit of moral validation over actual comedy has turned his show into a late-night group therapy session. Audiences come not for humor, but for confirmation of their beliefs. This shift may win social brownie points, but it sacrifices the spontaneity and cleverness that once defined late-night TV. Kelly argues that in chasing applause, Kimmel has forgotten the simplest comedic rule: the best jokes make everyone laugh, even if it stings.
Late night host Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air after taking the summer off. He's missed a lot. Kimmel says if you're not vaccinated, you shouldn't get a hospital ICU bed. But I'm not sure if Jimmy was being sincere because he wasn't crying. Anyway, it's just funny hearing someone say, "I see you," who nobody actually sees. Look, I don't want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were chanting.
Megyn Kelly didn't hold back when addressing Jimmy Kimmel's ratings, an average of 1.5 million viewers per night, with only 236,000 in the key demo. These are paltry numbers, especially for a network giant like ABC. By contrast, Tucker Carlson, filming out of his cabin, racks up over 20 million views with simple, unscripted videos. Gutfeld, too, consistently outperforms Kimmel on Fox News with a budget that's a fraction of what Kimmel has. The message is clear. Americans are rejecting polished, politically sanitized content in favor of raw, relatable voices. Despite having a massive platform and the full weight of Disney behind him, Kimmel is losing cultural traction. Viewers are tired of being scolded by someone who feels out of touch with everyday realities. Kelly and Gutfeld point to this as a wake-up call. No amount of flashy production can save a show if the content is out of step with the audience.
How much it costs to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show? I guarantee you it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcasts out of Maine in literally has 21 million views. Okay? 21 million views. Whereas, as I point out, on ABC, a massive network that comes into your home for free, that you have to make no effort to find, At best, Jimmy Kimmel can get 1.5 million. He needs to have a little self-perspective before going out there and hurling these insults because he looks a little...
Critics didn't have to look far to expose hypocrisy in Kimmel's narrative. Megyn Kelly reminded viewers of Kimmel's past skits involving blackface and fat suits, particularly his impersonation of NBA star Karl Malone and Oprah Winfrey. These segments weren't minor jokes. They were recurring bits, often played for laughs. Today, Kimmel positions himself as a cultural moralist, decrying injustice and calling for accountability. But Kelly and Gutfeld point out the contradiction. How can a man with such a controversial history now claim to be the conscience of America? These revelations strike at the heart of his credibility. What's worse, Kimmel has never offered a full reckoning or apology. His transformation, then, feels more like a pivot to avoid cancellation than genuine growth. The duo's argument is simple but damning. You can't rewrite your past with a new teleprompter script. At some point, your audience remembers, and they don't forget.
Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
Gutfeld and Kelly highlight the glaring contrast between Kimmel's sanitized, corporate-safe monologues and the biting satire that defined great late-night hosts of the past. In today's politically charged climate, many comedians tread carefully to avoid controversy, but in doing so, they also avoid humor. Kimmel's content feels filtered, polished, and approved by PR teams. His jokes lack risk, edge, and spontaneity. Meanwhile, Gutfeld takes jabs at both sides and embraces the uncomfortable truth that comedy isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to make you think. Kelly accuses Kimmel of wrapping every joke in a blanket of moral disclaimers, reducing comedy to a lecture in disguise. While satire should challenge power, Kimmel only challenges those who don't align with his ideology. It's rebellion in a Disney wrapper, edgy enough to trend on Twitter, but safe enough not to upset advertisers. And to many, that's not comedy, that's theater.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Several people shared in this achievement. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times he's second only to Justin Trudeau in his fondness for the practice. Yes, some of the very same celebrities who wanted you to believe they were horrified after yours truly said in 2018 that people used to don dark makeup in order to imitate well-known black celebrities and it wasn't a big deal. Absolutely ate up the performance by Hollywood darling.
Jimmy Kimmel's drastic change from frat boy funny to moral preacher hasn't gone unnoticed. Once the host of The Man Show, a series built on shock humor, trampolines, and beer, Kimmel now wears a moral robe and scolds America nightly. Kelly and Gutfeld find the transformation suspicious, even laughable. Gutfeld likens it to a washed-up boy band member going solo with a vegan cookbook. To critics, Kimmel's growth isn't organic. It's a PR stunt. It reeks of desperation to stay relevant in an industry that now rewards outrage over originality. Instead of adapting with grace, he's flipped the script entirely, abandoning the very humor that made him popular. For longtime fans, this sudden pivot feels like betrayal. For newcomers, it feels insincere. Kelly doesn't argue against personal growth, but she questions whether this transformation is a reflection of maturity or just the calculated moves of a host desperate to avoid cancellation.
Remember when Johnny Carson cried like a baby over Ronald Reagan getting elected? Yeah, neither do I. And you know why he didn't? Because his wife didn't keep his balls in a Tupperware container next to a box of tofu burgers. But the killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner.
It's hard not to notice the lack of genuine laughter in Kimmel's studio. Gutfeld jokes that his audience responds more to cue cards than comedy. Kelly describes the atmosphere as applause on autopilot, where claps come not from amusement, but social obligation. When comedy requires instructions on when to laugh, something has gone terribly wrong. Critics argue that Kimmel's audience isn't laughing because they're entertained, they're clapping because they are told to agree. This artificial reaction diminishes the spontaneity that defines great comedy. In contrast, shows like Gutfeld's thrive on unpredictability, real-time crowd energy, and a willingness to offend if it means being honest. Kimmel's show, by comparison, feels more like a seminar than a comedy hour. When the laughter dries up, so does the impact, and viewers can sense the difference. You can't manufacture laughter, and you certainly can't fake funny.
His blackface costumes included his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone.
Now, Karl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time.
And let's not forget Oprah in a fat suit.
15 minutes a day is all you need to get your heart rate up to where...
Please, Miss Oprah, you're crushing my... Sorry, Miss Oprah.
The most brutal assessment came when Kelly and Gutfeld concluded that Jimmy Kimmel isn't just telling bad jokes. He is the joke. His transformation, falling ratings, and preachy tone have turned him into the very punchline he tries to deliver. They didn't need to expose a scandal, just hold up a mirror. The reflection wasn't funny, it was pitiful. Kimmel once made people laugh effortlessly. Now he's a symbol of what happens when comedians trade risk for relevance. While others like Gutfeld continue to provoke thought through satire, Kimmel clings to virtue signaling in hopes of staying culturally acceptable. But comedy audiences crave authenticity. They want honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. And in this new era, Kimmel's overly curated brand of moral comedy just doesn't cut it. As Kelly puts it, he's not controversial, he's commercial. Not dangerous, just dull. The late-night rebel has become a network pawn.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine.
So what does Jimmy Kimmel's fall from grace really tell us? It speaks volumes about the current state of comedy, celebrity, and public trust. Once a late-night king, Kimmel is now emblematic of a cultural shift where humor is no longer spontaneous, but filtered through ideology. Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld didn't set out to ruin him, they just said what millions were already thinking. In doing so, they exposed the cracks in his carefully constructed persona. Kimmel may still command the spotlight, but the laughter? That's fading. His punchlines have been replaced with platitudes, his edge dulled by political correctness, and his audience shrinking by the day. Maybe he'll find a way back to his roots, or maybe he'll keep crying on cue while the rest of us look elsewhere for real comedy. Either way, one thing's for sure, the curtain is slowly closing on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and not everyone will miss the encore.